Today we have an esteemed guest. We have Lawrence Arcand. He's a geotechnical engineer and he runs a very successful practice in doing that. What would be the top one or two things that you would advise contenders as they kind of grow in the construction field?
Have courage and step out there and take the leap, give it your all and build what you can and not be afraid to do that. And you get people on board and don't be afraid to leverage some of the resources out there and talk with other people that are in the same boat and leverage those relationships with others to help you grow.
Are you starting to see more AI creeping up in your work at all?
There's no doubt. It's like a sophisticated calculator when the calculator came on board, right? Or then when the computer came on board. It changes the way you do things, and you'd be crazy to think it's not going to change day-to-day business. Helping write reports, helping write letters, helping write policies, procedures. We're leveraging it through some of the software we use that has AI capabilities to help pull together.
This is the Contender's Edge podcast, where ideas challenge institutions and underdogs rise to lead in construction, bringing you no BS insights, real stories, and tech-smart strategies to outbuild the giants in the construction industry.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Contender's Edge. I'm Vinay Nair. I'm the head of customer experience, and I'm standing in for Zolk today. And today we have an esteemed guest. We have Lawrence Arcand. He's a geotechnical engineer, and he runs a very successful practice in doing that. And so we're going to have a very interesting perspective today. I always like to ask guests who come on the show, what was the origin story? What got you into this field, but also how you started Foresight. What made you jump into that and want to build your own company?
So I guess the origin story out of school was that I started at a small niche consulting firm called SAE Inc. And we were very niche and did electrical grounding protection systems mainly for telecom facilities and telecommunication towers. The good thing about that is it was a small firm and I got to do a lot of different aspects of the company, including the technical and some of the business development side of things. One of the challenges is it was so niche that when the dot-com bubble burst back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it really affected the company. And so that's what predicated up me looking for another field or another job to do. And that's where I came upon this whole thing of subsurface utility engineering. So it was a service that was not something that was present in Canada at the time. It was something that was just starting to get grounds in the US. And one of the US firms called Tampa Bay Engineering decided to team up with a Canadian consulting firm called Totten Sims Ubicki and see if we could offer this service into the Canadian marketplace. And I was brought on board to essentially spearhead that work and of pushing that service into this marketplace. So that's how I kind of first got into it. And I stayed at that firm. It evolved over the years. It went from Totten Sims Ubicki, who eventually got bought out by a company called AECOM, which is one of the largest consulting engineering firms in the world and is still around to this day. And so we changed it from a department into its own company called T2 Utility Engineers. And I ran that company for about 19 years until I decided working for publicly traded companies owned by people halfway across the world wasn't really my cup of tea, and I wanted to give it a shot doing my own firm and make it more of a employee-owned, Canadian-owned, employee-run firm where we could kind of focus on the technical side of business and have fun kind of building and I guess in a way stretch my entrepreneurial muscle a little.
Right. And so tell us a bit about Foresight, like in the utility engineering space, but tell us like where you see the biggest opportunity right now for your business. Like where do you find you get the most calls around today?
So our kind of special sauce or the special service we do is all about the utility engineering side. So anytime anyone's building an infrastructure project in Ontario or for that matter across Canada or North America, there's our existing utilities in the ground. You'd think that as an industry, we would have a good idea of where those things are. And the reality is we don't. And so for far too long, people used to have delays and cost overruns because of this. And so we kind of developed this offering that allows people to put an engineering spin to gathering the records and gathering the drawings associated where utilities actually are and map them accurately.
And why is that so difficult? How come that's not the commonly found information or documented somewhere to make that easy?
Because I guess the key is it's a challenging thing to do. So if I can walk down the street and say, there's a McDonald's, there's a driveway, there's a hydro pole, but I can't walk down the street and tell you exactly where the underground gas main that you can't find is, or where the underground bell structure. There's a
That's not
ton.
documented somewhere with the city or anything like that.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's
And there
not.
are some, the challenge that the records that they have are either incomplete or inaccurate or don't have the level of detail needed to build some of these infrastructure projects. So, like when
Interesting.
you're building, for example, the Ontario line subway through downtown Toronto, and you have to build a shaft down 100 feet to tie in with the subway tunnel, if there's a utility in the way that stops you from building that shaft, you have major issues. So you have to
Yeah,
know exactly where a lot of these things are. And that's what we do. We take the process and put an engineering standard to it. So the standard we follow is called the ASC 38 standard, which
yeah,
I've been lucky enough to sit on the committee that's helped write and do some of the rewrites on the ASC 38-22 and the new 27 that's going to be coming out in the next year or two. So we kind of leverage that standard and give high quality, high reliable drawings to our clients. And then that's just one aspect. That's kind of, I'd say that's the foundation of
yeah.
which is knowing what's there. But on top of knowing what's there, then someone has to tell you what to do about it. So
Right,
if
right.
you've got a gas main in the way, identify what utilities are going to be a challenge on your project and help the owner figure out the most cost effective, efficient solution for dealing with those utilities and allowing you to still build the project you're trying to build.
Yeah, and most of our customers who we publish this podcast for are, usually general contractors, subcontractors, architects and engineers, engineering firms, but also sometimes, owners that are also do a lot of self-performing work. Right? And so those are kind of the four key, clientele. Who's the one that actually ends up bringing you in? You're getting in at the proposal phase, you're getting in at the permitting phase. At what stage do they bring your firm in?
Usually we start coming in right at the design phase. So
Design
usually
phase.
like
Okay.
we're either brought in by an engineer doing an infrastructure project, or if it's a development project, we may be brought in by the architect who's starting to do the plans for it
Hmm.
and sort of start at the very beginning. And then we may stick around and be part of the job as it progresses from design all the way into construction at times to help make sure the construction part of things goes smoothly.
Smoothly as well. Oh, interesting. And what would you say, like, if you're thinking about our audience in mind, like, what are some of the biggest misconceptions you find with our audience when it comes to engaging utility engineering at the right phase? What are the biggest nightmares and pitfalls that you're seeing out there?
I think by far the biggest one is assuming that the records that they have from the utility companies are correct and
Mm,
complete,
okay.
right? It's kind of it's not engaging someone like us to start doing things and taking the risk of using that improper information. And
But does
the
that
funny thing
happen? Like,
is,
it's not mandatory to have a utility engineer
it's
be a
not
part of it?
mandatory to do some of these things unless, like, if you're working on a certain Metrolinx project or some of the other things, or if you're doing an SPA submission in the city of Toronto, there's some mandatory components, but it's not mandatory on every project. So you can, I'll say, roll the dice,
Yeah.
and sometimes you get lucky and you don't have issues, and sometimes there's something in the way that causes you months if not years delays and tens if not millions of dollars in issues, right? And so depending on the size and the scope of scale of the project. So I think a lot of people don't realize that the records they have, just how inaccurate they can be, and then how effective it can be to have these services done in advance.
In advance. Yeah. Interesting. And so you're brought in by the architectural engineering firm typically, right? As kind of a specialist to come in
Yeah.
and form the design. Is that right?
Yeah, and sometimes when we're brought in by a contractor,
Yeah.
it would be because some of this work was not done as part of the engineering phase, and so they recognize the problems that they're going to run into if they don't understand what's going on, and so we'd be brought in by a general contractor, and or if we're on a P3 project or a design bid build project, that we may be brought on to work with them on that. Because the funny thing is the contractors are the ones that really understand what happens if they don't know what's there.
Right, right.
Yeah,
They're
there's a
closer to the action, right?
exactly. Kind of one of the funny stories when I first started at this doing this work well over 24 years ago, I think it was. We got approached by a contractor who wanted to buy the business. This was like we had only been doing it for less than a year, and their reasoning was because they realized they made so much money on change orders and issues that come up that they didn't want the engineers and owners to have this accurate information. They wanted to make money off the change orders. But the funny thing is, those same contractors now are very good clients because they recognize on their projects the value this brings.
Right, right. And I mean, in your collaboration with contractors and architects and engineers, what do you see as the biggest, productivity gaps, in that collaboration? Like, where do you see the break in the process the most?
I think without a doubt, it comes down to communication,
Yeah,
right? And then how we can communicate amongst different groups. I think, being enough to communicate internally with internal teams, it becomes much more challenging to communicate with external companies, and that especially when you have multiple ones. So
yeah.
that's where having those processes and that software that allows you to do that communication becomes a huge value. Because
Okay, yeah. I mean,
if you're talking from the same book or on the same page, everything else becomes much easier.
exactly. I mean, and that's kind of what, obviously a smart build, that's kind of what we help a lot of the customers do, is to kind of streamline that communication, within the different stakeholders you got to work with, right? And we see huge benefits there. What about from a technology perspective? Like, what are you seeing? Are you seeing any major shifts in technology and that's kind of been impacting the way you work? Anything you've been observing there?
I'd say maybe one of the bigger things we're seeing is the adoption of 3D models and such.
Mm,
So we're seeing design work being done a lot more in 3D now, and hence the need to have 3D models of both the above ground and the underground environment in
mm,
order to facilitate that design and the construction side. So 3D and even 4D models that will show how a project evolves over time. And the one thing with what we do, it's very easy, relatively, I'll say easy, to create a 3D model of visual above ground features. You bring out the LiDAR scanner and you can very accurate. It's much more of a challenge to create a 3D model of the below ground features that you
mm.
can't see.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you can create a very I'll say sexy looking model of the underground utilities, but if it's not accurate, not reliable, because you can't see it, then the quality and reliability of that comes into question. And so that's where having a engineering standard and process by which to follow is invaluable. You have to, in order to really be able to rely on those.
Wow, interesting. And are you starting to see more AI creeping up in your work at all, in the day-to-day workflow, or in at least how your customers work?
There's a little bit. I'd say right now there's a couple of firms out there that are trying to look at some of the AI from a technical standpoint. We're seeing, I'm going to say, more AI in the back of house and maybe some of the planning stuff, not as much in the technical aspects of what we do. But we've actually started an AI group within the company to make sure that we're keeping our eyes on things. And as things develop, we can be on the cutting edge and not be left behind
Oh,
looking at
wow.
it after the fact. Yeah.
You built like a little AI studio within your practice.
Just like a group of people, and their job is to just go in and look at all the aspects and make sure we're leveraging whatever we can within the business to be as efficient as possible.
Oh, wow. And so what are some of those early use cases that you've uncovered with this AI team?
I'm going to say a lot of it right now is administrative in
Mm,
function, like helping write reports, helping write letters, helping write policies, procedures. But the other things we're looking at is we're leveraging it through some of the software we use that has AI capabilities to help pull together data, dashboards, and kind of leverage getting some of the data out of the software that we currently use.
interesting. Yeah. So you're kind of at level one right now, right? Just kind of those
Very
administrative
much,
use
yeah.
cases, right? And then over time, we're going through that journey as well, right? Like we're starting just, hey, just make sure you're using ChatGPT. Are you introducing people to it, to Claude, to all the different engines? But our CEO, Rowan, who speaks on some of our ever episodes, like he's been really driving an agenda here within our company as well, because we're an AI company, we sell AI products, but do we all use AI in our day to day? And so he's been like running these workshops. We just had one today where we're just introducing people to level 1 level use cases, then level 2 use cases, and now he's given us homework now that we have to go and find a use case each that we're going to bring back to the next class, that we're going to figure out that we want to use AI to go and help them drive some automation. So adoption is like this slow process, but slowly
Yeah.
but surely we're getting there.
There's no doubt. It's like a sophisticated calculator when the calculator came on board, right? Or then when the computer came on board. It changes the way you do things, and you'd be crazy to think it's not going to change day-to-day business. We
Yeah.
actually, one of the groups that I get a lot of value with is from ACEC, the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies of Ontario, and we have a small business group in there. We get together as owners of the small consulting firms across the province and talk about different subjects. And AI was one of the subjects that was brought up, and one of the companies actually did a presentation about how they utilize ChatGPT and other AI software and what it's good for, what it's not good for, how they determine it, how they make sure they keep in compliance and don't open up opportunities to the outside world to be seeing behind the doors and the things they shouldn't be seeing, so to speak. Keep things in check.
Yeah, absolutely. So we ask every one of our guests to leave with one piece of advice for our construction contenders, and we're called the construction contenders because we're really serving the up and comers, the ones that are going to be the future AECOMs in the world. That's
Yeah.
our audience, right? And so with your time and experience in the field, what would be the top 1 or 2 things that you would advise contenders as they kind of grow in the construction field today?
I guess I would look at it from 2 different standpoints. One from, I'm going to say, a general business standpoint. Just kind of have courage and to step out there and take the leap
Hmm.
and really go out there and give it your all and build what you can and not be afraid to do that and be bold in doing things. And I think when you're doing that, really make sure you get people on board and don't be afraid to leverage some of the resources out there and talk with other people that are in the same boat and leverage those relationships with others to help you grow. So I'd say that kind of high level. And then I think specifically to what we do, if you do have a project, anything that relates to, or you dig up or trip over or have issues with utilities on any of the projects that you're working with, just know that there are firms out there that specialize in these kind of things that can help you out and make sure that your journey when it comes to the utility side of things is as smooth as possible, and you can manage any of those risks and costs associated with it.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what we want to do with this podcast is speak to people like you that help, contractors and what they do, allow them to get in touch with you very easily. So where can audience reach you if they want to get a hold of you and get your support?
I guess email wise, it's just first name last, so Lawrence.Arcand at foresightue.com, and that's the number 4 and then sighttue.com. They can also look me up on LinkedIn or jump on our website, and again, foresightue.com. It's probably the easiest, but I answer all my emails and pick up the phone. You can even call me 905-424-1959. I pick up all the calls. Yeah,
So you're available. That's awesome. You're
I'm
one of those
available.
the old school people. That's awesome. That's amazing. So Lawrence, listen, this has been an amazing conversation. Our goal is to really just talk to people who help our customers and really kind of highlight some of the things that they should be looking out for. So this has been very insightful in that way. We'll post your contact information in the show notes, but I appreciate you taking the time and talking to the contenders.
I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you for listening to the Contenders Edge podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Follow the podcast to get new episodes the moment they go live.